Hey, welcome everyone to our online Q School, our product spotlight that we are doing a full series on, and I can't remember what are we on, week 6?
Probably 6, something like that.
So my name's Guillaume Tremaine. This is
Shannon Markey.
Shannon Markey, and we are going to be talking about power supplies, which is very exciting because this is kind of our roots and where we started. To give you guys a little background, for those of you who don't know, QTran was started by my dad, who was a lighting designer and was trying to solve a problem for his own project. So he was doing a lot of high-end residential jobs and was doing low voltage lighting. Really fell in love with halogen low voltage lighting, but did not like the transformers that came along with the fixtures, mainly because a lot of them buzzed when you dim them. So his solution was to remote the transformer out of the fixture. And when he did that, there was other issues that started popping up, like voltage drop issues, where you could mount the transformer, safety concerns. And so he started developing a product out of his own need, really, to solve a problem. And that became QTran. We started developing we incorporated the company in 1993. We started developing the product in the early 90s and took the product to the national audience in 1995. When we submitted to Underwriters Laboratory, we submitted a product that they had never seen before for the lighting industry or for the low voltage lighting industry. Before that, all the transformers that were used were general purpose transformers that had to be independently UL listed with the low voltage lighting products. Our product was so much more advanced because of the circuit protection and the safety. We got a listing that had never been issued before, which is a low voltage lighting power supply center. But the heart of the power supply was the transformer. And what we developed was a toroidal transformer. We didn't develop the toroidal transformer. It had been around, but we improved upon the technology and really engineered it specifically for the lighting industry. So we wanted a really efficient transformer, so it didn't produce a lot of heat, something that made no noise or was very quiet, and lasted a long time. And so if you can pan down, Mike, on this power supply here on the table, you can see the toroid, and this is the toroidal transformer that we wind in-house. We're vertically integrated, so we actually wind the core of the product and the windings and everything that go into this. This is a debuzzing coil or a choke, and that is included in all of our power supplies. And we have primary and secondary circuit protection here. This particular enclosure also includes a capacitor and a bridge rectifier, which we'll get into in a little bit. But this is really the heart of where we started, the toroidal transformer. And that is what we still have a full winding department here. We still wind a lot of transformers. We have pivoted a little bit by having the AC transformers be able to produce DC output. And then, of course, we've gotten into electronic transformer solutions as well. So we're going to go over all of that. And did I miss anything?
Not that I'm aware of. I think we're good.
All right. So let's jump into some of the meat of the presentation.
So before we get started with the actual product line, just a quick review for anybody out there that may be new. Low voltage lighting is limited to 30 volts or less per the NEC Article 411. So it really means that it's a safe voltage where you're not going to get shocked if you touch it. But even at 30 volts, there's still a risk of fire if the amperage is too high. So most of the LED lighting is class 2. So class 2 is not only safe from shock, but also the risk of fire. So those limitations are 5 amps at 12 volts, which is 60 watts, or 4 amps at 24, which is 96. So when you get power supplies that are larger than 96 watts, normally it's one hot in, and then you're branching out to 1, 2, or 3 switch legs of 96 watts. Next. So when you look at AC and DC power, we still make AC products. Basically, there's a lot of the landscape products and all that still take an AC input versus DC. Then they do that conversion of the power right on the fixture itself. Other power supplies are DC output. The LED boards really want to see DC because it's a much more steady power as it's direct current versus the alternating current, which is a little more crazy, and I think that's an electrical term. Next. So when you're picking a power supply that you need, there's a couple basic things to determine that. So first thing is you're going to need typically a power supply, at least one for every single switch leg. You may need more based on the size of that zone or that switch leg. So you count those up. Constant voltage is all the products, LED products we sell at QTran are constant voltage. Most of your linear products are that way. There are some constant current things that come up, and we have some solutions for that as you get into our product line. But the type of output, do I need AC for landscape? Do I need DC for interior? Do I need 12 volt, 24 volt? There's tape products as well as other LED products that fall into any one of those combination of categories. Dimmed or switched? Switching's easy. If I'm going to dim it, what type of dimming is required? Do I want forward phase? Do I need reverse phase? Do I need 0 to 10 volt? Do I need Lutron ecosystem? Do I need Dolly or DMX for color changing? Once I have that determined, I'm going to pick if I need it indoor or outdoor. And either one, does it need to be pool or spa rated if it's too close to water? And secondly, if it's outdoor, do I want it surface mounted in a box or do I want it direct buried? So with that, we're going to go through the line sort of and talk about it, and we'll kind of show you how to sort through those questions in a little bit. So first of all, you look at magnetic versus electronic. As Gian mentioned, we were founded on making magnetic transformers. The biggest benefit of a magnetic transformer is its lifetime. So we warranty these for 10 years versus 5 years for the electronic, but really their expected life is about 60 to 70 years. So they will drastically outlive the LEDs. They're also typically a little more efficient than their electronic counterpart. They're larger and heavier. So if anybody's ever lugged one out to show to a client, they're not the lightest thing and they'll keep you in shape. But they're also not as susceptible to heat, cold temperatures, or moisture as their electronic counterparts. Our magnetics also typically have multiple taps. So it allows us to compensate for voltage drop. As you lower that voltage, you tend to lose voltage over longer runs. So those multiple taps help compensate for that voltage drop over distance. Any of our AC models that we're going to show you can be recessed. The DC can't because there's a little too much heat when we rectify that AC to DC power. And they also require a specific voltage on the primary side. You look at electronics, 5-year warranty on them, but typically their life expectancy is about 5 to 7 years. You're not going to get a whole lot more out of that than them. They're less efficient, which means they burn a little warmer typically. But they are smaller and lighter, so for mounting them or finding a place to hide them is a little easier. Whenever you're going to dim them, typically you want to use a dimmer with a neutral too. It helps make it dim a little more smoothly. And then they're also sensitive. Any electronic is very sensitive to heat, cold, and moisture, and any of those things that may be in the environment will shorten that life drastically if it happens once you install them. One of the benefits, they are also typically universal voltage, so I don't have to pick if it's 120 or 277. So real quickly, I'll buzz through the AC power supplies. As I mentioned, we do a little bit with landscape with AC power now. Periodically we'll get a call for AC transformers in an interior somewhere on Earth where they're still allowed to use incandescent lamps, but not a lot here in the United States.
Or they're using the Sora lamps.
Or using Sora lamps, yes. So right there we have the QT series, which is the one that Gian had mentioned before that John really founded the company on, and that is up to 1,500 watts, 1 to 4 transformers in a single housing, toroidal transformers with chokes and primary and secondary protection. We then introduced probably, 12 years ago, Gian, maybe, something like that?
Yeah.
12 or 15 years ago, we introduced the Q6 series. And that was a step down from the QT. It didn't have all the bells and whistles, but still had the high quality toroidal transformer in it. So those we do in a smaller medium housing up to 750 watts. They have a boost tap on there so you can still compensate for some voltage drop. Indoor only, and we'll tell you on another slide why it's called the Q6. It basically can be mounted in about any position you want. The next one is the QJB, which is basically a small junction box mounted one, which we'll have some pictures coming up, but it's just a small junction box. It's either a 4-inch square or a 4 and 11/16 square box. And then inside of there, if I can get it to open up, we have our toroidal transformer and a secondary protection, all that built in, isolated primary and secondary compartment. So there's a nice small model in AC, and then we also do them in DC. which we'll talk about. Then the QOM is basically the QT housing for outdoors. So it's your typical landscape style housing with the same series of product that we put in the QT inside of the QOM. So it'll go up to 750 watts with a single or a double transformer in there, and then all the other multiple taps in your primary and secondary protection. Then lastly, we have the QSet series, which the QSet is the one on the bottom right of your screen, and that is where we take the transformer or the toroid and we put it inside of that cassette, which then drops into the Q Vault, which is IP68 rated. So the QSet themselves are also completely sealed internally with an epoxy. So they are basically watertight inside of an IP68 rated housing. So now we're going to move into DC power supplies.
And just a little side note, we did do a Q Vault QSet webinar 2-3 weeks ago.
I think it was probably the best one we've done so far.
Yes, because of the co-hosts. Yes. So the magnetic LED power supplies. This is the QTM series, which I've got here. Again, this is the QTM DC plus cap. We have the QTM DC, so that's without the capacitor, without the blue thing, and that gives us a little bit more ability or capability. So we can go from 60 watts up to 600 watts. So at 24 volts, that would be 96 watt output circuits. So we're not feeding 600 watts on one run. It's broken up into 6 runs. And that is great for applications where maybe you're not dimming and you need a lot of capacity. If you are dimming, you really want to think about the capacitor, because the capacitor filters out the ripple and or filters out the flicker, really. So the problem is that the capacitor limits our capacity. And so we can only go up to 200 watts in the DC plus cap. It still is the QT. So we've got the terminal blocks in the primary and the secondary. We've got our taps here, so you can boost up your voltage to compensate for your long runs. We've got the primary wiring compartment and the secondary. So they both have primary and secondary circuit protection. So you've got all of that capability built in, and it dims really, really well. So I've got a little demo here. And so we're showing, and I'm going to turn this on and try not to blind everybody. So this is, showing just the DC plus cap and how smooth the dimming is. It dims to black. So if I get it down far enough, I'll turn it so you can see the LEDs. And trying to stop it at the point of not being able to see visible light to off is the biggest challenge, because it's hard to see where that transition actually is. But if dimming is a really critical element in the space, this is a good solution, especially in the phase control part of it.
As I mentioned with the Q6, it's a same power supply as the QT. It just doesn't have all the multiple taps. It's got a couple taps on there to boost the power up or down based on what your primary voltage is or your distance to your load. So there you see the one on the left, that is the basic DC model. And the one on the right, the DC model will go up to 200 watts. The one with the plus cap capacitor for dimming will go up to 100 watts, 12 or 24 volt. And then there in the center at the bottom, we show you basically the 6 different ways you can mount this power supply. A lot of magnetic power supplies, you got to mount in an upright position to dissipate the heat. With this, it can be mounted in any position you want. That's based on the efficiency of the toroid. It just doesn't put out a lot of heat. And as we move through these, the whole idea behind most of them is, if you think about a 600 watt power supply, instead of a contractor mounting 6 separate devices, they're getting it all in one enclosure, pre-wired, mounting it, bringing power to it, going out to their loads. Very easy, very huge labor savings.
So we've got the QJB DC. So Sharon briefly mentioned the QJB. QJB DC is available from 10 watts to 20 watts in the smaller enclosure, and then up to 40 watts in the larger enclosure. Great solution for small areas where you might have some under cabinet lighting at like a wet bar, and you just don't need to dim it, and it's a small run. So again, up to 40 watts and the larger enclosure.
And it is an actual 4-square junction box, or
Yes.
4 and 11
Thank you.
sixteenths. Moving on to the Q-set in magnetic. So here's a cutaway of it showing the toroid in the bottom. So that is a half-filled cassette. So normally that's completely filled with epoxy. So if you were to look at one of the Q-sets, you won't see any bolts or screws. They're all held internally by that epoxy. So be it magnetic or the electronic will show you, it's all sealed in the bottom of there. That'll go up to 300 watts in the magnetic version. The magnetic version is also very good for extremely cold climates. So it can go down to -40 or below because it's a mechanical device really rather than an electrical device. And then once that sealed unit is wired up, it's dropped into the IP68 Q vault. So you got a watertight transformer inside of a watertight box. Next.
So the Q hex is also a burial enclosure or burial transformer. It goes inside of the Q Trix R50. The Q hex mini goes up to 60 watts DC. It's great again for smaller areas where you need a remote, 24 volt DC power supply. It does have multi-taps and you can actually mount a fixture to the top of it. But it's just a good solution for those smaller planting areas that you might need a 24 volt DC transformer. Like our QCAP product would be a good solution for that in a planting area where you might want to have the QCAP. This could be a good product for it.
So we get into other electronics. One of our better sellers is the IQPH80. So it's 80 watts, 12 volts or 24 volts, white or black housing with either junction boxes on both ends or a junction box and a switch or a dimmer on the other end. So they are available in either dry or wet. The one with the dimmer is only rated for interior use only, dry. Operating temperature on these is -40 to 140, so a very wide operating temperature. The one on the bottom is also available with a cord and plug. So we've used it a lot in hotels for headboards and things like that, where they have a wired outlet behind the headboard. You plug this in, you got low voltage power to your whatever lighting might be in the headboard. And then you have a Caseta Pro dimmer put into the box. And then you use a Pico on the wall, and you have a control on the wall from that wirelessly without running any new wires. So great for that type of application or retrofits as well. And then when we jump to the next one, that's just the exterior version of it. So once again, that QOM housing, which can hold about anything you want in there. We're going to put all kinds of different stuff in the same housing with different back trays. So this is for 2 of the IQPHs in there. So it's 160 watts. It can be a single load, or we can operate those separately with a hot coming in and then turn those on and off separately as well. So it can be either 160 watts or 2 times 80. Slideshow. Oh, there we go. All right. This is you.
Oh, it's my turn.
Your turn.
So the QTE LED is our electronic LED option. And I'm just going to grab one of our power supplies that show that. Mind grabbing that? Yep. Actually, I'll do a side-by-side comparison. Both of these are the medium enclosures. I don't know if you can see that. Maybe go to the full slide. So they're both the same housing size. The difference is, if I turn it the same way, is the power tray. So the power tray holds the components, and so we are able to utilize the same enclosure size for both the QTM and the QOM, and use just different power trays with the different configurations on the power trays. And that obviously helps optimize our inventory and standardize some of our enclosure
Looks like
sizes.
there's drivers behind that tray there.
So this is the QTE LED, and this does have drivers. And so the drivers, this has 3 96-watt drivers with 3 0 to 10 dimming modules, and this gives us the ability to have up to 300 watts inside of one QTM enclosure or QOM enclosure.
So on the next few slides, you're going to see the QTM and the QOM. The OM is just the outdoor version of the other. So this is your slide too. I think we got out of order there.
You're just giving me all the slides. So the QTM ELED AW and WD is our warm dim and adjustable white power supplies. We can go up to 3 of those inside of one enclosure as well. And it's available in the media or in the QTM indoor enclosure or the outdoor enclosure. So both are available. And then, of course, we have our strips, which are, our standard right now is 2,000 to 2,700K or 2,000 to 3,000K. So that's available today.
All right, then we have the Plus IA, which is individually addressable. So that's individually addressable white or colors. So basically, it's up to 200 watts. If you look, the drivers are a little bigger, so we can't fit 3 of them in there. It's only 1 or 2 outputs. But once again, available in both housings. It's DMX. Then if you don't have a DMX system on the job, we also have some DMX wall controllers that we sell to accompany that.
So this is the DMX as well, and this is our power supplies and controllers independent of one another. It gives us a little bit more capability. It is a little bit more complicated as well. So we can go up to 3 outputs and 3 drivers, and it's a great solution. And then we've got our all-in-one, and that's the Q drive, and that is for both DMX or Dolly control. The problem there is that we can only go up to 2 inside of one enclosure versus 3.
And then we go to Lutron drivers. So you have the E, which is their ecosystem, or L for their basic high-lume power supply. So if you look at the bottom left picture, you'll see that that's typically the way a contractor is going to mount those, is on the outside of a junction box, and then bring the pigtail through one of the knockouts on the front of that enclosure. So with this, we can mount up to 5 of those in a single box. We do not do an exterior version because the rating only goes down to about 32 degrees versus the others going down to 0 or negative below 0. But with that, you can mount up to 5 of those. So if you just think about the labor savings involved from a contractor's end, instead of pipe and wiring to 5 different boxes, it's 1 box pre-wired, pull power to it, and you go out to your loads.
So we've got the QSet eLED. This allows us to have one of our electronic LED power supplies inside of our QSet, or 2. And so you can actually fit 2 drivers inside of 1 QSet, and you can fit 2 QSets inside of 1 Q vault. So we can actually have up to 4 100 watt or 96 watt drivers inside of 1 Q Vault 5. Again, the Q Vault 5 is IP68 listed. So we have an IP68 listed driver solution. And the enclosure can also accommodate constant current drivers. So if you do run into a situation where you need not constant voltage, but constant current, we can do that as well.
As well as there's a mounting tray option that we keep very well hidden on our website. So if you run into a DMX job where you need different drivers in there, we can do some custom mounting of those and put those in the IP68 box. Next. So lots and lots of choices. So what we're going to do now is just for 2 minutes, jump to the website and take a look at how to filter out when you're really searching. Just by determining a couple of those things we talked about in slide 2 or 3, you can quickly determine what drivers make sense for your given project.
Right, so Shannon kind of laid it out pretty well regarding what questions we kind of ask when we're going through the power supply selection. So if you go to products, the first question is, are we powering LEDs or are we powering traditional AC power? So most of what we do today is LED power supplies. And if you go to scroll down a little bit, we have our filter or our dimming options. So on the left hand side, we have our filters. So the first part of it is our dimming, and we have individually addressable, phase control 0 to 10, warm dim, DMX. So obviously I can read all of this, but we have all of our different dimming options. And then if you go next to environment, we have our indoor, outdoor, and then how you want to position the power supply. And so if we go back up and we select maybe 0 to 10, and that starts filtering or limiting our options. If you go to indoor, so now you see we've filtered down a lot of different selections to, how many do we have here? 9. So click on the QTM eLED, and if you go to master ordering guide, you'll see that we have our full spec sheet.
Down below too, right? So there's all
So the spec sheet is just a single sheet with technical information and things like that. When you get into the ordering guide, it's really a detailed document that talks a little bit more about install instructions and things like that. So it goes from about 2 or 3 pages up to about 9. So it gives you a lot more information. That same is true of our strips. When you get into the strips or extrusions, the detailed cut sheet really walks you through putting together that catalog number.
Now on this particular cut sheet, we've got our voltage drop chart. That is not necessarily going to be there for all of our cut sheets, but this does give you a little bit of insight to how far away the power supply can be to the fixtures depending on your total load on the wire and your wire gauge. We do have a whole voltage drop chart, and we will be doing a webinar on voltage drop. But if you go to technical voltage drop calculator, you will be able to get that information on the website today. So
Great.
if we go back before I think we run out of time, because we're running out of time.
We're quickly running out of time.
We have a new power supply that we are pretty much launching. The spec sheets are not quite up yet, but they will be up this week, and that is our QZ power supply. And Shannon's going to go through that quickly while I get the dog and pony.
So if we get the slideshow started. So basically the QZ is a great power supply because it's really a single power supply you can use for multiple applications. So don't strain your eyes trying to read the cut sheet. We got a lot of that information coming up on the next couple slides. So if you jump to the next slide. So wattage wise, 30 to 288 watts. So we have a 30 and a 60, a 96. So for your smaller loads, we do have some smaller size power supplies up to 288. So when you get into 288, that's 3 feeds of 96 watts. But out of the same power supply without changing any catalog numbers, you can do forward phase, which is also called leading edge, or magnetic low voltage, symmetric forward phase. You can do reverse phase, called trailing edge or ELV. You can also do triac, any kind of triac dimmer. You can do 0 to 10 volt or 1 to 10 volt dimming. And then even listed to do potentiometer. So if you got a job with potentiometer, call Gian, don't call me.
They work pretty well.
But no matter what the input is, the key thing is that the output is PWM. So that gives us very smooth, flicker-free dimming down to below 1% on any of the controls we're using on the front end. Also gives you flicker-free dimming, and then the housing itself available in white or black. Now, if you want to wet label, typically you'd have to put a -W or something at the end. The same unit is good for indoor or outdoor as well. So it's really a great default power supply, other than if you're doing digital dimming, it's going to cover about any protocol that they want to control it with on a given job. Next.
Yeah, so to give you a reference of size, we've got my phone on top of our 30 watt, which is the smallest power supply enclosure in the QZ offering. And you can see that, it's a little bit larger than the iPhone, but not terribly larger. So it goes from 30 watts, and this is the 192 watt iteration. And so one of the neat things is that we are dimming with PWM on the output. And so that allows us to control different LED arrays, but have the same dimming curve. So from an earlier presentation, we went over our standard, our static white, our standard static white, and our high efficacy. They are different in the amount of LEDs they have per cut point, which gives them different dimming curves if you dimmed them on a standard constant voltage power supply. So this allows us to have, I'm probably going to blind people.
There we go. There we go. You got to work the dimmer correctly for it to work. So that's
yeah. Nobody told me about that. So you can see that we've got our 2 different LED versions that dim at the same rate, which is very nice on the QZ power supply. So again, the real advantage here is that it can do 0 to 10 or phase control in the same enclosure, obviously not at the same time, but and that it goes from 30 watts to 288 watts and has a smaller enclosure size.
Can you please clarify that each feed is an individual class 2 feed? So the question is, the comment rather is, are all the QZs Class 2 drivers even at 288 watts?
Yeah, so we're now into Q&A.
Well, it came
Yes.
Yes.
The output,
Yes.
yes. Each output is limited to 96 watts.
Yes, so the 192 would be two 96-watt outputs, and the 288 is three 96-watt outputs.
And on the device itself, in one of the pictures, the low voltage and the high voltage are in two different wiring compartments as well. They're separated.
Yep. The cut sheets will be up this week, so we will make sure that that detail is in there so you can see the wiring compartments.
Okay, so since we are a little bit beyond time, I'll just read some questions regarding QZ and then we'll go backwards. Do you have to choose the dimming method, 0 to 10 or forward phase?
You can choose in the field. It does not have to be specified beforehand. It's capable of doing either. It cannot do both at the same time, though.
Okay, we are going backwards in questions because we missed them
That's
as we
fine.
went.
That's fine.
So, oh, did one of my colleagues answer it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, it was can everyone see the questions? Okay, the question was, about recessing our QTM DC products, which they are not able to be recessed, so I do want to remind.
I believe some of the electronics can, but it's on each one of the cut sheets if it's recessible or not.
Every cut sheet will note.
The
whether or
magnetics
not
are not, but the
magnetics are not due to
electronics,
heat.
there's some of them that can be.
Yeah, the bridge rectifier creates too much heat.
So that's, sorry for stumbling. Has that been answered? What gives certain power supplies their pool and spa rating?
The pool, well, the construction of the transfer, which one? The magnetics, the construction of the transformer is specific. There actually used to be a difference between pool and spa and landscape lighting transformers. They actually standardized that, but the isolation barrier between the primary and the secondary actually has to be grounded. And the wiring, the primary and the secondary have to be isolated, and then the wiring has to be jacketed. So for the electronic, I think it has to be rated for it. I can't remember. Well, in the Q vault, it does have to have that isolation barrier
Yep.
sleeving. I don't know if there is a sleeving that's needed in the indoor or in the QO, the outdoor, above
I
ground.
believe one of our trusty regionals has answered that in writing in the Q&A.
Oh, good.
Okay, I think we do not have, and you're welcome to keep putting in questions. We're going to be here for a little bit. We thank you for joining us, but feel free to ask any questions either in chat or the Q&A.
And then you could also reach out to any of your regionals or send us an email. And that's true with any of this. If you need samples, if you have voltage drop questions, any of us can walk you guys through that. And if you need samples, let us know.
Sample,
Thank you.
yeah, I would encourage you to have samples because seeing's believing. You know, you can demonstrate the product and how well it dims.
Yeah, you can probably
It's
do
very
it better than
special.
we did.
Probably could.
The next question is, besides size, is there any reason why we would select the QTM ELED over the new QZ?
Great question. If you want to control the primaries independently, or if you want to have different zones, the 288 is only going to allow you to control those three outputs together. The QT ELED or QOM ELED will allow you to control those independently of one another. Also, the QTM ELED can be recessed, so you have a little bit more flexibility on how you're mounting the housing.
Okay, thank you for joining us. See you every Tuesday here for Q School Online. Reach out to your regionals and your reps for questions. And thank you.